everybody. You are live on Shally's Alley. It is finally September, just in time, because the weather is finally reasonable here in Atlanta. I don't know about in Dallas or in Chicago, where my friend Ben Solomon is located, but at least here in Atlanta, it has returned to some semblance of humanity. Let me put it this way. Last night, burning the midnight oils, I was working late and I opened the window, which if you know anything about Atlanta, you know that we have mosquitoes here that are the size of birds, and they can be really dangerous. So I put a brand new um, mesh screen on that window, and for the first time in a long while, I was actually able to like listen to the night sounds and get some fresh air from the outside that wasn't hot enough to bake a freaking turkey here in my office. So Ben Solomon.
It's probably the first time in months you've had a window open, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's oppressive heat. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ben, what's up in Chicagoland?
It's getting a little cooler here, which is nice. Finally September, like you said, finally Friday as well, which is exciting.
And then you guys go into like the whiplash of like it just freezes over. Like,
yeah, we have
no warning, no nothing.
A short fall and a short spring, but they're nice.
Well, folks, super excited to have Ben on the show. We've crossed paths a few times, more than a few times. Ben's been in the industry for what, going on, I want to say 17 years?
Yeah, it's like 17, 18, something like that.
Something like that. And you'll be surprised to know that unlike a lot of folks in our industry, just the nature of what we do, Ben is actually one of the longest standing sourcing leaders at the same organization. So his first job as a sourcer was with is Objective Paradigm now. Objective Partners, yeah. Objective Partners, yeah. So he started out in sourcing and then grew up in sourcing and grew up watching me on TV, and then one day became like me. I mean, he's been there for his whole career, which is highly commendable, and it's great that you're happy at an employer like that. I'm just pointing out how unusual it is, because a lot of times, recruiting has a ebb and flow business, and especially corporate, where a year or two they're growing and then they stop growing, and be that as it may, I don't want to play into the whole politics aspect of things. But where you work, actually, Ben works in a firm that is a partner that has multiple lines of services nationwide for various industries. Essentially, it's a search partner with some different models, contingency, RPO, and things like that. And so a company like that has a need for a dedicated team. You run a team of about, 18 people or so?
Yeah, so 17, 18, 19 people on the team, something like that.
So every year of experience, you get another, like when you have 18 years, you get an 18.
I never thought about it, but you're right. Those do just about line up. That's interesting.
Happy birthday. You get a new head count. Woohoo! That's awesome. I like that. I wish somebody gave me that for my birthday. I've inherited teams of the single largest team that I literally inherited. Like, here you go, was 23 people. And that was direct reports. And that was, I didn't like that so much.
That's a lot of direct reports, period, and a lot of direct reports to inherit, for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of direct reports. And it wasn't like I was, a VP and they were all directors. I had, 23 line people like out in the, doing the job. That was the biggest team I inherited. I've built teams that were bigger, but as, growing, and then with managers and everything like that. So it's definitely fun and exciting. And that is actually kind of the nature of the topic that I wanted to talk about. Folks are probably interested in, some of the nuances of building a team and scaling it up like that. I mean, you've spent over a decade building and leading sourcing teams. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, what do you look for when you're hiring a sourcer? I get asked this a lot. What do you look for in a sourcer? And I guess part two of that, what do you look for when you're hiring them? But also, how do you differentiate between someone who can source and someone who can lead sourcing?
Yeah, so I think there are.
Sorry, it's a two-part question.
I'll go to the first part, then maybe you have to remind me the second part, but we'll start the first part. So
Yeah.
there are a couple things I look for, right? And a lot of the hiring I've done over my time here has been um, entry level folks and then training them from scratch
Yeah.
to be sourcers. We have
Which
now in the
is
past,
that's good because you're looking for some raw ingredients that can become right. You're not interrogating them on their sourcing technique.
definitely, and we have more in the past couple of years started doing sort of a mix of both types of hiring, but a lot of my experiences in hiring entry level folks, and you know what I'm looking for is, and for the entry level folks, it's great if they have some experience with some kind of CRM or some kind of database, or just doing it's the organizing of information, the retrieval of information, and how their mind works around those things, right? And um, we often have had success with people from a liberal arts background, right? History, English, sociology, um, anthropology. You know, I
Why
was a
is that? Because they're used to like research
yeah,
and like
it's just that research and organizing,
drilling.
synthesizing information. And I was a history major, and I graduated college, and I had no idea what I wanted to do, and found my way into this industry. And we've had other success stories like that. And, you know, we've someone on my team who before they became a sourcer was an archaeologist, right? And I like that because it's kind of the same kind of thing. It's that
Oh,
digging for you know fossils and artifacts versus digging for information, kind of the same mindset. And then another thing that I
nice.
see that often works well is if people have experience working at a museum or an archive or a library, right? So higher entry level folks, if they've worked at their college library or
Okay.
college, campus museum or archives or things like that, that is often a good signal to me, like, oh, they have this ability to really dive deep
Drill
into
down and
drill
yeah,
down
right.
and think about how you're going to organize information. And then sort of from a more maybe soft skills or work style perspective, people always ask me what makes a good sourcer. And one thing that I always say is you have to be able to really focus on um, one thing for an extended period of time, but also be able to shift focus, really focus without getting bored or burnt out. Right? Like you might go into the okay, like I've got this search. I'm going to go on LinkedIn. I'm going to spend all day doing Boolean searches on LinkedIn and really digging through profiles and finding the people, and I'm going to enjoy that versus being bored or burnt out by it. But you have to be able to have that sort of hyper focus, but also shift it. Right? You start the day thinking you're going to do that, then oh, that role's closed. We need to shift to this other role. Being able to shift that focus somewhere else without taking it personally or getting attached to what you were doing and being able to move on to the next thing.
Is organization so I talk a little bit about this when people ask me about it, librarians, researchers, especially with the raw skills that then become investigative skills. um, is organization a part of that though? Because like what I've always thought is the research mind is problem solving, puzzle solving. It's curiosity. It's the endless. There's got to be an answer to it. That's the drilling down. But the more I think about it, and I guess the older I get, which also means that more my memory deteriorates, um, the more I realize that there may be a lot of tools out there for us, but there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of websites. There's a lot of techniques. Is do you look for organization skills like information management, even though if they may not have gone to school for information management, but do you look for that, or is that just something that comes with the what you described?
Yeah, I mean, it can definitely be helpful. And I think you made an important point about that. Like, there's so many tools, and there's always new tools coming out. And
Right.
like, one of those skills you have to have is have a better term, but just being a fast learner, right? Being able to jump into any
Right.
tool or
And
software and
that
be
kind
okay.
of comes with the territory you just described, but
I'm
the
gonna figure
organization,
yeah, I'm gonna figure out how
yeah,
I'm gonna use this,
yeah,
and so that's a big piece of it. And being curious, being inquisitive to find that information. Yeah, and then I think the piece of organizing it, because you're searching for candidates, searching for data, whatever, and then you do have to put it in a spreadsheet and putting it in the ATS and
right.
putting it here and putting it there, and that's something that we expect of sourcers too. Is not just finding of the information, but the organization and the delivery of the information, whether it's building lists, whether it's delivering market data to clients. Like that's a big part of it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, where do you go? All the places you could go. What do you do when you get there? Templates, search commands, search strings, pitches, all that stuff. So, I use. I've been and I'll admit I'm probably overly emotionally attached. A big user of Evernote since it
Hmm.
came out. I was the only person in our industry ever to get Evernote certified, and so I mean, I went all in on this tool, and it's been my second brain. I use it a lot. I use it in ways that it probably wasn't even really intended. And then I tried OneNote, and it was okay. I had to use it because the companies that I worked with only had Microsoft. But I've heard about Notion. I've heard about Obsidian. Barrier for entry is really high. What do you might have maybe some team tools as well. What do you use as your knowledge base or your PKM?
Yeah. For me personally, my external brain is Google Docs, like both in,
Oh, right. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that goes with that's true. Good point. Evernote is the notebook, but all the files are on Google Docs. That's right.
yeah. And so
Yep.
both for work where we're on Google and in my personal life, like if I have a thought that I want to write down, it's Google Docs, and it's really become a muscle memory of, Command T to open a new tab, and you type docs.new into the bar and press enter, it opens up a new
Right.
doc, you type in what you want,
Sheet
and
that new.
yeah, exactly. Sheets.new,
Yep.
slides.new, and then it saves it, and then searching, name it something so I can find it later, and like building lists and information in Google Drive is really how I offload stuff from my brain into
Right.
somewhere else.
Right.
And I think for everyone it's a little bit different. Um, and again, I care less about um, how they're organizing the data or what tools that they're using, just that they have a way to do it. And that's actually
Okay.
that's a question that I ask in all of my interviews, or
Oh,
almost
how
all
do
my
you
interviews.
see? There you
You,
go.
and it's how do you keep yourself organized?
Yep.
Either work, school, personal, whatever. Like, are you a post-it person? Are you in your phone? Are you in your head? Are you write it down paper and pencil? Are you Google Calendar? And that I like to see how that gets people talking about what they're doing. And if somebody says, "Well, I keep everything in my head and I never write anything down," that's probably not the right profile.
Unless they happen to have an eidetic memory,
Right.
we'll just never know about that stuff. But yeah, so that was why I was asking about that. So you don't really have a system that you impose on your team or say, "Here's the way we keep stuff." You just expect them to be able to have a way to organize.
Yeah, I mean, we to there's some system, right? Depending on the project, either this is what I expect you to do in the ATS, or we might have a
Right. Or you have a Google
spreadsheet,
Doc.
a Google sheet, and
Yeah, right.
with a template, candidate name, and here's when you reached out, and here's when you did all your follow-ups, and here's the status there, and that kind of thing. We do have that kind of structure.
That makes sense. Yeah. So that was a big question that I had was around, just managing information overload, really, quite literally. Have you played around at all with Notebook LM since you're a Google shop?
A tiny bit, and not really me,
Tiny
but
bit.
some folks on my team have been playing around with it
Really
for a little
impressed
bit.
with it. Really, really
Yeah.
impressed with it. As a pro user, you can add 300 documents, source documents. And what really stands out, what distinguishes Notebook LM from everything else, is that it is a unique. Um, it's a good RAG tool. You can actually have your own content in there, and so it's canonically correct, and you have your own information. You can verify where it comes from. It doesn't generate. So there's a lot less hallucinations and things like that. It is a micro model, though. I mean, 300 documents is not, the size of like the ChatGPT's large language model, but it's the 300 documents max. And I don't think I have any notebook that's bigger than like 180, 200 documents. What it does though is it's able to synthesize that information, make connections for you, and automatically draw mind maps and give you um, a deep dive analysis and make suggestions and things like that. So what I really like about it is it's basically like ChatGPT, but for a microcosm of documents that either are mine or that I selected. Think, for example, rec and some candidates, right? So you got 50 resumes. You can drop them in there and ask questions about the resumes, or you got spreadsheets and things like that. So it's worth checking out. I'm writing a kind of lesson plan for my TSI University where I teach people about this kind of stuff. I'm writing a lesson plan about Notebook LM as a tool
Yeah.
for free. You only get 50 documents, but that's pretty
Still
good.
something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a really good point. Is like the AIs now are going to become these like external brains or these systems, and
Personal AIs, yeah.
I think it will be interesting to look at like for us, for me, okay, I've got all these docs, whether in Evernote or in Google Docs, or
Right.
whatever. I need the AI to feed on those. I think for people coming into the industry, it might just be AI from the get go, right? I'm just putting any information into the AI itself to remember, hey, remember this, or save this for later, and then having that, and then that's a great example, like the idea of, hey, here's 10, outreach messages I use that have worked in the past. Please look at these. Please look
Right.
at this new rec and tell me what message I should write. And we've found it a really, everyone on my team's using ChatGPT or other tools, and it's a great tool for, um, again, sort of those first drafts of those messages and getting started. And as everybody knows, AI is not perfect, and there are things you don't want to just copy
Add your
paste.
voice and
You want
yeah,
to add your voice. You don't want to copy paste blindly and send Buchanan, but it can be a great
absolutely.
way to kind of kickstart that process of writing outreach or doing some of those things.
But you know what though? Like for me, it's it's very different. So the large language models, they have their place. The RAG tools have a different place. It's more like you said, the brain. I would love to have Evernote tied into one of these RAGs. Um,
Yeah,
but I haven't found that. That's why I'm kind of looking at Obsidian, just trying to. I'm thinking about maybe just kind of starting an Obsidian on the side so that I can use it for automation. Things like, for example, the emails. It would automatically be able to add things to Obsidian and then add from Obsidian to the Notebook LM and keep. Or it can organize things automatically into, like, if it's emails, it goes into the emails folder, and then look at which emails got the most responses and start
yeah,
giving me. Because we talk about A/B testing all the time, but the analysis of the outcome of the A/B test is sometimes a little murky. You might have I have a 50%, 60% chance of getting it right, that the B is better than the A, but you don't really have a way to systemize that unless you have something like this. So that's kind of what that's where my mind is going, is running Obsidian on like Claude Code, and then having the emails auto populate into Obsidian so that it can
mhm,
run an analysis. But anyway, geeking out.
yeah.
I could geek out about
But
this
no, I
all the
mean, it
time.
just it lets so A/B testing is a good example of like what it lets us do at scale that we were never able to do at that level of scale before. Whether it's
Exactly.
the outreach, the A/B testing, like the possibilities are really fascinating.
Yeah, you have to rely on your CRM providing you with the out the outcome analysis of, all right, this one got X% better
Right.
responses or whatever.
But that's
Um,
sort of the dream, is like the system that can plug into anything, both from like a personal perspective, like,
that's what I
hey,
was saying.
read every email I've ever read all my tweets, read every blog post, and just like become me and be able to answer questions as me and
That's
write my
exactly,
emails, and then also like
you nailed
plug
it.
in, look at every single record in my CRM, and just figure out what to do with it and go do it.
Yeah, you nailed it. I've gotten partially there with N8N, and so there's a lot of functions that I can automate with N8N, self-hosted, so it's completely free. And the reason I like Obsidian is because it's also self-hosted, and which means I get to keep all the data. But I'm just a little afraid of the, like, it's kind of like the deep end of the pool, and especially having been pretty much married to Evernote for so long. It's just going to be one of those things I have to like dip my toes in there. But that's exactly what I wanted to do, is be able to bring together these multiple streams. I can do it with N8N, but here's the problem: it takes some cajoling. It takes some, you know, pushing and prodding and trial and error. Where the external LLMs like Claude are able to organize things already because they already
Mhm.
have this systemic
Right.
organization. We had a person from the chat that asked a question about hiring. I'm going to try and show it on the screen. It may not fully show, so I'll read it. When you have an interview with someone who is maybe just out of college for a sorcerer role, um, what questions, and they're mentioning star, situation, task, action, result. What questions might you ask to learn about their researching skills? So how would you ask them to identify their research prowess?
Yeah. So there are a couple questions, and then the other piece of the question was cut off is how do you find out if somebody is,
Staying up to date.
keep in touch with new tools, new sites.
Yep.
So some of the questions I like to ask, especially for people coming out of school, I'll ask, tell me about a favorite project that you worked on in school. Ideally that is a research project. Then I'll kind of dig into because you're gonna get the best answer to that question when something that they're passionate about or something that they really enjoyed. So hey, tell me about your favorite project. Well, okay, how'd you start the research for that? How'd you dig into X? How'd you dig into Y? And that can lead down a really interesting path. Um, and I also like to ask people, it's kind of similar to the how do you keep yourself organized? Is how do you approach learning a new tool or a new piece of software, right? Are you again, I'll kind of prompt with different styles. Like, are you just figuring it out on your own? Are you an ask for help? Or you go to YouTube and watch videos? Like, how do you approach
Right. Are
learning?
you a show me
Right, and
or
that
let me watch you, or are you like a let me do it and mess up and then correct me? There's those different learning
yeah,
styles.
and then you're just kind of looking for um, how deep their answer goes, right? Is it
Right.
well, I just kind of figured it out, or is it I went to Google and that led me to some YouTube videos and I found this channel that talked about this version of the tool and just like you can start to kind of get to tell how their mind is working with those kind of questions.
What's funny though, how often people actually say I read the owner's manual or I read the user guide. Like that's rare. Most of the time people don't do that. I don't know why. It's like I was at a client where I was implementing some hot fixes for their CRM, and one of the people that was kind of like in charge of the CRM, like they were like, "Oh, yeah, I consider myself an expert on this." I won't name it CRM, but like I've never seen anybody do that. How did you figure out how to do that? And I was kind of like, I read it in the instruction manual.
So if,
They'd
if, if
never done that. They're like, really?
yeah,
I didn't even know it had an instruction manual. I'm like, wow, it's if you go to help and then go to the documentation, it tells you what all the commands are. Oh wow. And they're like, I'm gonna learn this now. I'm like, you've been here how long?
Shally, that's really funny because I have almost an identical story that I
No
tell.
way.
Um,
Awesome.
and not to toot my own horn, but it's a good example of I think the value that sourcing can bring to TS. So we had a client and we were doing a little bit of consulting, helping them implement a new ATS. And so I was in a meeting with them, walking through some things, and they were talking about, oh, we have this issue, we haven't been able to figure out how to solve it. We want to set it up this certain way. And I was like, well, what if you click over there? Okay, what if you click on that? And then what if you click on that menu? Oh, well, what if we change this? And then that solved the issue. And they're like, how did you know how to do that? Like, have you used this tool before? Like, no, I just kind of looked at it and figured out what would be the most likely way to get to where we want to go. Like, I hadn't
From
used that
having
particular.
used
I've used
20,000 tools like it
right. I've
before,
used lots
right?
of different. I never used that one in particular, but I've used lots of different ones. And like that's again one of those skills that you're looking for is can you pick up that tool quickly and just sort of through intuition. Oh, like I think if we click on settings, oh, I think we need to click on this menu, this sub menu. Let's scroll down. What does this do? Oh, maybe if we change this to that, oh, that did the thing
Mm.
we needed. Cool. And they were kind of a little bit blown away on the solution to this problem. They've been trying to, well, and I was like, what do you mean you had figured out? Like it was super easy just to figure out where to go. But I think that's a really good example of kind of that mindset.
It
So that,
is.
that that's so funny that we both have a
Yeah,
similar
same
story like that.
experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
peeling back the onion. I love what if. I tell people all the time, especially when they're like, how did you discover all this stuff about search and sourcing and everything? And they're like, you must have all these techniques and methodologies for discovery. I'm like, listen, most of the time it's there's not like a aha moment where I'm like I wake up in the middle of the night and I go, you know what I should do? I should go run this on that, and idea, ding, like that doesn't happen. There's no eureka, at least not very often. More often than not, it's I really think that there should be a way to do this. I wonder if I do that. What if I do this? What if I do that? What if I do? Oh my God! If I do this, look what happens. And then that's when it's not eureka. It's what if. It's exactly what you described. There's
Yeah.
all
It's
these what
it's
ifs.
it's try it's trial and error. It's trial and error, and
Yeah, he got a lot of error.
it's being curious, pure curious to want to go down those paths and not getting frustrated and not wanting to quit. And it's I use the example of going down the rabbit hole, looking for a candidate's email address or something, right? Clicking around, looking at their blogs or Twitter. Oh, this has a link
Mhm.
to this. This link's broken, but if I edit the link, I can get to this other place. Their GitHub sends me to this, and just like having fun following those paths. Um, and that's one of the things I like is that it's sort of about sourcing in general. There's a creative piece and a logical piece, right? There's this creative piece of how am I going to follow this path, and then the logical piece of the Boolean string. That's a true false yes no. And I think And I really took to that, just the way my mind works, and building out those strings and figure, okay, if I move these parentheses around, or if I take this term out, like what's it going to do in that trial and error of finding
What
things that
if?
really work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of just making mistakes and um, trying to figure out how to undo it sometimes.
Yeah.
So I told you there was a part two to that question. As you know, when we were talking about how do you select people who could source, especially if they're new to even recruiting. But the second part of that is how do you determine if they can lead sourcing? If they can take initiative and be like I don't know if you have sourcing leads or team leads or whatever, but like that's a different skill set, in my opinion.
Yeah. And we do have folks who have taken on some more sort of lead type roles, and it's typically not something I'm looking for in an interview, right? Because it's something that they're going to grow into
Into later down, right?
in the role. But part of it is just seeing if they take initiative. Then that tells me they have initiative, right? Like, and
Valid.
another signal is if I see that there's somebody who's becoming somebody that other people on the team go to with questions, right? Like they can always come to me, but I often say, oh, well, people are going to X person with Y type of questions. That's interesting. And we have weekly team meetings where everybody gets together and talks about challenges or new tools, and just speaking up in those meetings and talking about. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, hey, here's this new awesome thing that I discovered that everybody should be doing. It can be, hey, I've got this challenge and I could use help from the team to kind of brainstorm
Yeah.
ways to solve it. That
We don't do that enough, man. I I've set up. I've called them a bunch of different things. Jam sessions is what I'm calling them now. But situation rooms, war rooms, and those have been some of the best. Those have been some of the most fun and interesting, and also productive activities. But we just everybody can get together and just kind of throw in their problems out in in the in the meeting and experimenting because everybody thinks differently and they have different perspectives and yeah, but I don't think we do that enough. There's this feeling that I don't know why, but there's this feeling that um, you don't want to work on somebody else's wreck. Like you've got your own problems. You don't want to, I don't know if that's the deal or not. I mean, if you work at a company and you're all teammates, that's fine. But I think
right.
as an industry, we don't really do that. Like, wouldn't it be awesome if that at a SourceCon we did like bring your recs and just brainstorm on a rec and like everybody work on this rec for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and see what we can do and just document it. I've done that in my own teams and it produces really cool results. It's also really fun. It's like everybody, you play some music, everybody throws out ideas. By the way, in case you're curious, I start usually with some kind of bizarre, wacky, like task, like a purple squirrel hunt. Or one time I said, uh, there was a manager that everybody liked to kind of, pick on a little bit. I'm like, whoever finds the first picture of this person with a mullet will be able to choose the place we get lunch from, right?
Yeah.
So it's not real. I mean, I was going to pay for lunch anyway. It's not. I'm not really giving anybody like money, but they get the bragging rights and they get to choose the lunch venue, and everybody gets to make fun of their favorite manager to make fun of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
And
in a playful way, not a disrespectful way.
I think the more knowledge sharing, the better. And I think in the first couple of years of my career, we felt a little bit differently. We're kind of like we don't want to give away the secrets, right? Like
Yeah.
we've put together the best tool stack, and we've got the best skills at Boolean, and like that's our secret sauce, and that's why the clients are going to pay us money, and we don't want everybody else to have. But then there's been sort of a mindset shift of like the more information sharing, the better. SourceCon and other conferences, like the more we can all share what we're doing with each other, that's just going to help all of us grow. So I 100% agree.
Yeah, I think the jam session is a great idea. A few times I've had it where I set it up and nobody had a rec they wanted to work on, and that can backfire. Excuse
Yeah.
me. So if you're planning on listeners, if you're planning on doing this and just doing kind of like a jam session with your team, bring at least one, come prepared with one rec that you're going to throw out there to break the ice. That's the reason I did the puzzle, is to kind of break the ice, and then people were not
And
shy after that. But I've even had situations where nobody had a rec that they
yeah,
wanted to work on.
bringing something is definitely the right move. And I'll throw in a little plug there for the upcoming Recruiting Innovation Summit SourceCon Hackathon that we're running, because that's exactly what we're doing, is those puzzles, the sort of wacky research challenges. That's what the hackathon is those sort of fun internet research challenges. So if you like that, check out the hackathon.
Oh yeah, those are usually kind of funny too.
Yeah,
I remember
we
some
try
of
to we
the
try to make them fun.
fun and funny, fun that is also funny.
Yeah,
So we talked about leadership. Now you bring in these rookies, and you've got some Play-Doh that you need to basically mold. You molded yourself, and other leaders in the industry. I can name quite a few. Glenn Guttmacher, for example, Tim O'Connor, people that I've mentored and through my career, Jim Stroud, people who I've had a very strong influence on. They also started out molding themselves. But if you're going to hire rookies and you're responsible for them, you're going to have to um, imprint them with some fundamentals. So, how do you, I guess, training philosophy question, right? How do you balance teaching fundamentals versus like bright shiny object syndrome, which we all seem to suffer from, and you're training some sorcerers, in an environment where technology moves so quickly? How do you balance, like, okay, let's play around with this stuff and try all these new things? Yeah, cool, but we also need to sort of stick to some basics that we know are going to work. Like, how do you kind of
yeah,
work around that in training, in a training setting?
yeah. The fundamentals are super important, Boolean and all the other stuff, and we try to pair that with the training on the tools, right? So they're we're not overwhelming with tools. It's really about the fundamentals, and it's hey, let's practice the fundamentals using our ATS. Okay, then let's practice the fundamentals on Bullhorn, on so Bullhorn's our ATS, and then on LinkedIn Recruiter, and we have sort of a structured training that we put a lot of people through. Of we're going to learn how to research and find information in the database. So I'll give an example. We have some trainings to go through. Here's how to use the search in the ATS, and then there's some questions they have to answer. And those questions are really structured to look at not just how are they using the tool, but for example, attention to detail. So for example, there's a question: tell me how many people in the database have the first name Merlin. And simple search, but there's also somebody in our database with the name Merlinda. And sometimes they'll get an answer where they'll include the Merlinda in their count. They'll just look at the count and not really look through the answers after they typed in Merlin.
Hmm.
And there's,
Hmm.
7 people total, but 6 Merlins and 1 Merlinda. And do they catch that? And if not, okay, we'll train. Okay, you should have looked for this. And just sort of training on that attention to detail and some of those other things. And I think a lot of it too is it's just repetition, right? It's like it's a muscle.
Okay.
It's a muscle that you can build, like going to the gym, like you're building the sourcing muscles in your brain. So we're
So
gonna
you provide them some scenarios,
yeah,
basically.
it's here's a rec. Build what you think is a good Boolean string. Go run that string on whatever tool we're looking at. Give me bring some candidates to the table. Let's talk through the profiles, why they're a fit or not good, and we're going to repeat that a bunch of times with a bunch of different recs from different clients that we work on. And the more recs you look at, the more profiles you look at, you start to build those connections in your brain. And I always tell people, like, when I first started, I remember agonizing over whether somebody was a good fit, right? I'd have a resume and go, oh, how do I decide if this person is a fit for this job or not? And really kind of agonizing. And then just the more you do it now, it's just yes, no, yes, no. Like you can look at things that profiles sort of scary quickly and decide whether they're a fit for what you're looking for or not, because you've looked at so many profiles and looked at so many jobs and sort of built those connections in your brain.
Do you have a manual?
Um,
Like a
not
handbook?
not really. I mean, we certainly have
Or you just have some
material.
Google Docs?
Yeah, we have some. No, for sure, we have some Google Docs. We
Right,
certainly have the
right, right.
material that we've built up over
Things
time.
you've done, right? Your library of knowledge, but you don't have like a, here you go, day one, flip to page one.
Yeah, there's no sort of official manual.
There's no
Um,
recipe book.
yeah, the most there is the most structure is like a manual for myself when I'm training people. I kind of have a script of like, okay, let's
Right.
and go here's what we're going to
What
look at.
what do I need to cover?
Yeah,
Yeah. Right. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So, interesting. AI. Let's switch a little bit
Sure.
and talk about something we've already sort of touched on it a little bit. I mean, Notebook LM is kind of not exactly. It's not really an AI. It's a RAG tool, but um, it's still kind of in the spectrum, right? I know you're pretty hands on with AI tools. With that, basically, it's in the best interest of anybody who is a recruiter, much less a sourcer, to stay up to date with what's going on. And I know you're definitely out there in the forefront, hands on with everything that's kind of coming out, and what's been, what hasn't been. Where do you see what we call AI, so generative AI and LLMs and machine learning and the kind of like ChatGPT and Claudes of the world and all that stuff? Where do you see that actually enhancing sourcing, and where do you see it becoming distracting, smoke and mirrors, noise that people are just too eager to to play around with and procrastinate with? Like where do you see that? Where is it going to go that's going to help, and where is it going to go that's going to hinder us, basically?
Yeah. So there's no doubt, obviously, that AI is going to be a huge part of the future of sourcing, just like any new tool that comes out, right? Whether it's email, job boards, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
AI, and
When the internet
anybody.
became
Yeah,
part of everything, and so AI is the next internet. It's eventually it'll be part of it. You're going to be using stuff you don't even know has AI in it,
100%.
basically.
And
Yeah.
so anybody who's in the sourcing world needs to make that part of their tool stack.
Hmm.
And I think right now we're very early, obviously, in how AI is going to come into the space, and there's definitely that shiny new tool syndrome that even before AI, I think it's easy for sourcers to get caught in, oh, this tool's cool, that tool's cool, and you can end up spending all your time looking at cool new sourcing tools and not spend any time sourcing, right? And I think AI multiplies that just because there's so many different tools. And I think we're in this period, or in this early period now, where it's hard to know who the winners are going to be, and there's not of because of AI, there's not a huge barrier to entry to creating a decent AI sourcing tool, and so the market is flooded a little bit with a lot of tools, both for bigger companies and from startups, and everybody's got, hey, we've got this AI sourcing platform, and it's going to solve all your problems, and that's
But you know
that's
what, though? I mean, it's exactly what you're saying is exactly right. There's really no barrier for entry, which is two things. First of all, it leaves a lot of opportunity for there to be stuff, but it also means that there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of vendors that just literally are just taking
right.
ChatGPT and putting a skin on it.
100%.
Um,
And people just
but
slapping AI on their tool because
right,
that's the buzzword. And is it really an AI, or is it
it's
just an
not.
algorithm?
Mhm.
Right.
I've actually only seen maybe 3 or 4 different tools that I truly have. MML, sorry, ML LLMs, like machine learning LLMs,
Yeah.
and I can name them with one hand. But the point that I'm asking, the point that I'm making is the question is, um, where is it? Not which vendor. Like I'm not saying who's the company that's going to win, but what is the solution what is the enhancement to sourcing that AI will produce, hopefully
Yeah.
soon, in your opinion, or one of them? There's probably going to be more than one.
Yeah. So we mentioned a little bit is like the scale, right? It's going to allow one
Yep.
source to do what we're doing, but at a much bigger scale, right? And there's always going to need to be um, that human touch, but the ability to um, use AI to automate some of the outreach and some of the sourcing. I think it's really exciting.
So you're thinking enhanced productivity, velocity. You're
Yep.
thinking, efficiency, right? Well, that's already happening, and I'm coming out with next Tuesday. I'm coming out with an article that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, not yours, but a lot of other people's feathers. I think you'll be surprised. Something that nobody's really talking about. That's vital to this movement towards automation. But what I'm saying is, I hear you, and I think that's really what it comes down to. Is it's not a do it for you. There really is no do it for you. There's do some things, there's do some of it for you, but it's like I was having a conversation with somebody about automobiles, cars, right? You don't necessarily work in your car. Some people do. Police officers, they call it their shop because they're in there and that's where they do business from. There's people who drive for a living and so on. But generally speaking, most of us use automobiles as a mode of conveyance to get to work. So for us, a car is a way to get to work so we can do our job. We would have needed to go to work if we walked, rode a horse or a bicycle or took the bus or the train or flew or whatever. We would have needed to get to work anyway. So the car isn't really substantially significant. It's just a faster way to get there. And what you're describing is exactly the same. It's this technology is going to be like the car was to get to work. It's going to get you the results faster. And some cars are self-driving, maybe, whatever. I don't care. The point is, these tools, some of them have some self-driving, but the reality is you still have to get there. You still have to decide where you're going. You still have to have a plan, what time you're going to leave, which route to take or whatever. And even if all that is semi-automated, I'm rambling. I'm just trying to say, I totally agree with what you're saying. And I think that's something that's lost with a lot of people that are hyper in tune or like, I want to call it mass hysteria. They're hysterical about AI and how it's going to do everything. It's going to replace everyone. It's going to, it's so unbelievably over the top that it's unbelievable, right? What I think is believable, is what you said. It's going to help us get there faster, right? That's definitely one thing. Where is it going to get in the way? That was the other side of the question is what's the bad side? What's the internet had a lot of good things. It brought into the world that created businesses, but it also destroyed some. It created opportunities, but also created things like, social bullying, social media bullying and other things. So there's a downside to it. What's the downside to this?
Yeah, I think a big one is as companies start to use it to automate outreach, for example, it's just not going to be targeted very well, right? Companies are going to start putting these systems to place and be like, oh yeah, this is the solve for everything. Turn this on and great. And like even just from my personal experience, the number of recruiting spam text messages I get to my phone every week over the past, let's call it year, 2 years, has gone up from 0 a week to 4 or 5 a week. Right.
More like 4 or 5 a day. I'm getting texts.
And it's
yeah.
And then people, it's almost like we're destroying the utility of it before we even get started because we're doing it badly, and people are just going to stop looking at any text messages from numbers they don't know. And the people who might want to be more deliberate of building these systems and setting things up correctly and really targeting their markets and building these automated outreach campaigns, by the time they get there, they're not going to be as effective because everyone's turned on their spam filters and is not looking at text messages because people turned it on too early and sent out thousands of spam messages, and candidates just ignore them because they're not good. So I think that's a good example of how it can really get
noise.
In the way. Yeah,
noise.
creating
noise
more,
and
more noise.
Resistance. Yeah, you think it's actually going to give us a bad reputation, which some would argue it's hardly possible to do because we already have such a bad reputation anyway. But
yeah,
everybody hates recruiters until they need a job. But
I think it could, right? Just because it can increase that volume.
Yeah.
Look, I'm neither AI like super optimist or an AI doomer. I think I fall somewhere in the middle, pragmatist. But I do think we're going to go through some kind of cycle of these tools coming in, right? And there are tools for sourcing, and there are tools for candidates to write resumes, and there are tools for hiring managers to make decisions. And it's going to become a cycle of just AI tools and AIs talking to each other, and then people are going to want to bring the human element back into it. And I think maybe we need to go through some of that pain to rediscover, like, to really get
some of these things probably shouldn't have been automated.
You do need to figure out which parts should be automated and which parts shouldn't be, and where you need the human sort of tweaking the process and running the process.
Yep. Did you see that video, or I thought it was a meme, I'm not sure, about the two AIs talking to each other?
Yeah, I've seen some of those for sure.
They're both like customer service reps.
Yeah.
Thin or nice or one of those, and they don't realize they don't realize each other is an AI until part of the way in the conversation, when they all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, are you a digital assistant or something like that?" "Yes, I am." "Are you a digital?" And then all of a sudden it devolves into, they start talking this like language that is almost like code,
Oh
and
yeah,
it
yeah,
just
I've seen that one.
goes right off the deep end. Like, and so you're like, the candidate is going to have the AI write the resume, complete the job application. The recruiter is going to have the AI evaluate the candidate's application and resume, and then have an AI do the interview, and then have an AI make the decision, and then it's all going to come for full circle, and people will be like, why is this not working? Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting to see how all that plays out over the next couple of
You know what
years.
my favorite quote is about this? Robots do exactly what they're told. And that's the problem. They
Yeah,
do exactly what they're told. They're gonna if you say go that way, they're gonna go that way until something else says go somewhere else, which may involve them running into something they're not supposed to, or running off of something they're not supposed to, or whatever. So that's hilarious. Um, let's talk a little bit about something that is, I think, more um, unique to your setting, where you're working. You have centralized sourcing, which is unusual for an external firm. Um, there's not a lot of larger firms like that have centralized sourcing. They usually have dedicated teams for specific clients, stuff like that. So you have this environment where you have a mixed bag, and you have sourcers that work on multiple recruiting, I don't know, objectives or plans or whatever. What's the biggest mindset shift in order to get the most value from your sourcers when they're switching? Because for me, I'm working with a client. I get to know the client, and it's like I got my blinders on. I see things from the client's perspective. But switching then to if I was working for 10 clients and I had to like switch every, I don't know, day or hour, I don't know how I would handle that day. What's the mind shift or the mindset shift that people need to know about to do that?
yeah, and we have both, right? So on our
Dedicated. Okay.
RPO consulting side, people are typically dedicated to one or sometimes two clients at a time for a long period of months or years. So that's a little bit different. And then on the agency side, they're acting, they're working with the agency recruiters, and they're working on multiple jobs, multiple clients every day. So it's definitely, we call those roles both sourcers. They're both on the team, but those are definitely kind of different mindsets. Where on the RPO side, you are able to plug into one client for um, a particular period of time, and that's really about
Yeah.
learning their processes, learning their systems, and how you can sort of plug in and contribute there. And then on the agency side, it's really about that hunt, right? And just going out and finding, and it's less about learning. You learn about the clients, but you're not dedicated to one client. So it's really about, okay, how can I figure out how I can, as quickly as possible, look at a job description, figure out what we're really looking for, build that Boolean string that I think is going to get me good people, go find those people, put those candidates in front of the recruiter, do that calibration, what's good, what's bad, and do that cycle a couple times. So you're right, it's a different mindset between those two things for sure.
So
I
is that
think
like a muscle you train or something?
actually, I think a lot of it is about confidence, like just deciding, yeah, I can do this, and that's something I see that people need to build is like, yeah, I can take a job description and go find kick-ass candidates because that's what I
But you
do,
do
and
need to shift that.
and
Like,
just sort of building up that confidence piece of it is part of it too.
got it. Got it. What advice would you give somebody that's maybe thinking about, especially with a lot of corporations cutting down on teams, just because they're not hiring or just slowing down hiring? What advice would you give someone who's in a corporate setting before they, not before, but like, what advice would you give them if they're considering moving to an agency or an RPO partner? Perhaps they haven't done that in the past.
Yeah, I think one is just, and this is true for anybody, just always be learning, always be trying out, be curious, be inquisitive, be trying out new tools, be playing around with different AI tools, figure out how to, build your personal tool stack in a way that works for you. And then I think that moving, it's specific to moving from corporate to agency. I think sometimes on the corporate side, a lot of the role for sources or recruiters becomes about process, right? Moving people from one stage to the
Mhm.
next, sort of shepherding that process. And it can be a change from going into the agency role where it's like, okay, you got to make X number of outreach per day. You got to be on the phone if you're recruiting.
Got it. Yeah,
We're
there's some
expecting X number of
quotas or
phone calls.
whatever.
There's more kind of that production environment of like
And there's more rapid fire, like switching between.
100%. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I actually only had one other question for you from my list of prepared questions, but then there are my two, capstone questions that I always ask. So we're almost there. Thank you for bearing with us here.
Yeah.
After being a leader at OP's sourcing function for most of your, 14 years, most of your careers, you got a lot of time in as a sourcing leader with one organization. And this is maybe a little bit of like, open the kimono. What's a mistake you'll never make again when it comes to building or scaling a sourcing team? Like never, ever will I ever again. And obviously, something you'd want to admit to, but is not, like I don't want to like embarrass yourself, but something that you learn from.
Yeah.
You're like, I definitely can't do that again. Learn the hard way. I got a lot of those. So remember we were talking about making mistakes, a lot of mistakes. That's me.
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to my mind, and this is just more sort of a general leadership thing, I guess, is just like trusting your instincts, especially when it comes to hiring. Because I can think of a couple times where it's like, I'm not sure about this person, but let's give them a chance, or we really need to hire somebody right now. And whenever there's that initial, I don't know, that usually ends up being true, right? And it usually ends up playing out the way you thought it could, or the way you were like, yeah, this could end up going south. It usually does. Sort of some sort of trusting that instinct. And then another thing that I think deserves a lot of attention is the sourcer recruiter relationship and managing
Mm,
what that should look like, managing egos, managing the handoff, managing ownership and credit. And there are times that I've gotten that wrong in the past, and I
that's a
think that's
tricky one.
that's something that I think people don't always give the amount of thought to that they should.
Yeah, especially I agree with recruiters that are experienced recruiters and are coming from another environment where they didn't interact with sourcers, and they have a misconception, which a lot of people do, that sourcing is a junior entry level job. Now, you can be entry level in sourcing. You can also be entry level in recruiting, but the function of sourcing is not entry level as a function. There are definitely specialists, just like there are specialists in recruiting and marketing and legal and so you're right. If there's that misconception, which happens quite frequently, it could create imbalances or favoritism, or the opposite of that. I've seen places where the recruiters refuse to use the leads.
I was just going to say that, like they think, oh, I want to use my candidates, not their candidates, because it'll
Right.
make me look better. Like we got sometimes like, no, we're all on the same team. We're all aiming for the same
Yeah.
thing. Like there's a division of labor for a reason. You can have one
Yeah.
person doing the sourcing
You both
research,
win.
and then you get to spend more time on the phone, building relationships, networking, selling, and like when you have those engines running the right way and working together, like that's what really works. And yeah, sometimes that's
Yeah, that's a
a
really good
shift that
point.
needs to be made.
Really good point. Wow, thanks a lot, man. A lot of insight here. I learned a lot. Certainly, I'll be posting some feed. I'm going to use Notebook LM, by the way, to post some excerpts about this here down the line. So we're pretty close to the end of our time here. There are two things that I always ask my guests. The first one of those is, who should be our next guest?
Mm.
I'm not putting you on the spot. I mean, you can give me a name and they won't even respond to me. Like just because I'm calling them, inviting them to the show doesn't mean they're definitely going to do it. But who would you love to see on the seat here?
Have you had Sarah Goldberg on before?
I have, yeah.
What about Aaron Matthew?
I've invited her multiple times. She was unable to go because of her employer previously, and in her new job, she's more able to go, but also has to go through comms. So she's working on that.
Right. Well, those were the two I had off the top of my head.
Great minds think alike, and fools seldom differ, right? I would definitely reach out to Goldberg again, though, because it's been a while. Anybody else come to mind?
Um,
Or how about anyone you wish you could, put on the hot seat here? Like, I don't know, a particular type of role. Somebody once said they'd love to see a product manager from an AI product on the hot seat. And I've been working on trying to get somebody for a while. They don't really want to come on the show and sit on the hot seat for
Okay,
whatever reason.
here's something that I think would be interesting. And again, most of my career has been in technology recruiting and sourcing, and there are technologists who become recruiters, and there are recruiters who become technologists.
Yeah.
I think those are both interesting conversations. Or having a double interview with one of each, someone who went from recruiting into technology and someone who went from technology into recruiting. That could be a fun conversation.
Okay. I think I know a few people. Like it would be a good panel, right? Someone who
Yeah,
went this way and
it'd be an interesting panel for sure.
double. Like they 3 people on the show. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that idea. All right, and then the last question is: a lot of folks watch the video or listen to the podcast, so give us something to chew on. That's a thought provoking question. So, what should we be asking ourselves introspectively about anything that you're passionate about? It doesn't have to necessarily be what we talked about today.
All right. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind,
Yeah.
going back to AI, is like, what happens if AI doesn't turn out the way everybody thinks it's going to? Like, what if we're in an AI bubble and there's a collapse and it never really gets that much better than it is right now? People think there's going to be this exponential increase in the power of these models, but what if we've really gone through whatever exponential growth there's going to be, and the rest is just incremental? Like, how do we plan? Because I think everybody's kind of thinking the other way. It's going to keep getting better and better, and the models are going to be able to do more and more and automate more and more. And yeah, that's probably what will happen. But what if it doesn't? And how do we plan for that? And how should we be thinking about the next 5 to 10 years?
Got to think about the other fork on the road, right?
If the bubble pops.
That's lovely. Yeah. So what are you going to do if the bubble pops or turns out to be, I don't know, whatever, not what you expected? Love it.
And again, that's ability to focus on, hey, we're focused on AI right now. If we need to shift, what's the next thing? Cool, we can shift to the next thing because that's what we do.
Absolutely. I, for one, I've always been in the back of my mind. I've always been thinking about what comes next as far as technology, because there's going to be, Kurzweil or whatever his name is talking about the singularity, whether that happens or not. But think about the possibility, right, of this singularity happening. Then what comes after that? What are we going to do? I can think of a few things I would do, but honestly, I don't think any of them have to do with recruiting. Just because I've been, it's been 30 years, man. I think if I had a good reason to do anything else I wanted to do because technology got to the point where I don't have to do whatever anymore, there's a couple things I would do. One of them for sure would be go back and get my PhD in semiotics. That's something I've been dreaming about for a long time. But getting a PhD while you're raising a family and have a job,
yeah, it's a lot of things to do at once.
Yeah, but that would be my next thing. Would be maybe go back to school and just to learn. Like there's not like a career, opportunity for that on the other end. There is for people who do that for a living, but like I'm just thinking about doing that. So anyway, well, dude, thanks a lot for taking the time out of your Friday to hang out with us here, folks. Hopefully we will see you back here next week. We have Diane Prince. This is a lady who has built from scratch and sold staffing firms for tens of millions of dollars. She's an expert at scaling and has a lot to offer. If you're somebody who's growing a business, it doesn't matter what kind of business, whether it's recruiting or not. She's excellent at helping you scale. And then after that, we have coming back again, Steve Bartel from GEM. And if you want to nominate someone, please do. We are always looking for nominations. If you want to nominate a guest, you can go to the srcn.co SA, and there's a link to nominate right there. So srcn.co SA. Hopefully we'll see you guys back here next week. Until then, be kind to yourselves. Take care, everybody.
Thanks again, Shally. It was an honor to speak with you.
This was great. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.